The ceasefire in the Middle East war is once again being shaken. The United States has bombed Iran for 2 consecutive days, and Iran immediately attacked Gulf countries in response. President Trump made strong remarks, saying that Iran will no longer exist. Let's take a look at this today. Let's get right into it. Currently, the United States and Iran are exchanging attacks for 2 days in a row. Even though a dramatic agreement was reached to sign a ceasefire MOU, the ceasefire is once again unstable. First, it was Iran that started. Iran attacked a Panama-flagged oil tanker passing through the Strait of Hormuz with a drone, and the United States defined this as a clear violation of the ceasefire agreement. The U.S. Central Command immediately responded, announcing that it had carried out airstrikes on Iran's reconnaissance infrastructure, communication facilities, air defense bases, and drone storage facilities, among other military installations. The U.S. made it clear that as long as attacks targeting merchant ships continue, it will not rule out additional military action. In response, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps strongly protested. They claimed that the U.S. attacked 5 outposts on Iran's southern coast and insisted that it was the U.S. who broke the ceasefire first, immediately launching a retaliatory operation. Iran announced that it had fired ballistic missiles and drones at U.S. military facilities in Kuwait and Bahrain, warning that if the U.S. repeats such attacks, it will raise the level of its response. Iran also pressured that the ongoing follow-up negotiations could be suspended if the U.S. continues its military actions. Fortunately, it is reported that there have been no confirmed casualties from either side's attacks so far. The U.S. also stated that there was no significant damage to major U.S. military facilities, and Iran has likewise not disclosed the specific extent of any damage. Both sides keep blaming each other, each insisting the other broke the ceasefire first. Officially, the ceasefire agreement is still in place, but on the ground, airstrikes and missile attacks continue to occur one after another, causing tensions to rise rapidly again. There are concerns that even a single additional clash could cause the situation to deteriorate much faster than expected. Currently, the United States and Iran are directly confronting each other, each blaming the other for breaking the ceasefire MOU. Both claim they followed the agreement, but the United States says Iran's drone attacks on ships in the Strait of Hormuz clearly violated the ceasefire. In particular, the United States emphasizes that Iran violated the agreement to guarantee the complete passage of civilian ships, and explains that the recent airstrike was a direct response to this violation. On the other hand, Iran's position is completely different. Iran claims that the United States has heightened tensions by continuing to support regional allies like Israel and by increasing military presence around the Strait of Hormuz, which they argue is itself a violation of the Memorandum of Understanding for ending the war. Iran claims its missile and drone attacks were justified retaliation since the U.S. airstrike occurred first. As tensions over responsibility rise, the U.S. issued a firmer statement. Vice President J.D. Vance said Iran signed the ceasefire, the U.S. respected it, and any disagreements about the agreement should be settled diplomatically. He went on to say that if there are complaints about how the agreement is being implemented, they can simply call, warning that responding with military action is unacceptable. He also stated that violence will be met with violence, making it clear that if Iran launches additional attacks, the US will respond even more strongly. The most dangerous aspect of the current situation is that both sides claim to be the victim. The US is raising issues with the Sangsun attack, while Iran is criticizing US military planning and support for its allies. Even though both sides are referring to the same ceasefire agreement, their interpretations are completely different, causing diplomatic trust to rapidly erode. There are growing concerns that even a small clash could halt follow-up negotiations altogether. President Trump has also shown a tougher stance. President Trump announced on Truth Social that the U.S. military struck Iran's missile, drone storage, and coastal radar base, citing Iranian aircraft violating the ceasefire. He said it's likely they will never learn their lesson. He went on to emphasize that if we can no longer be reasonable, there may come a time when we have to finish what we started so successfully with military force, and if that happens, Iran will no longer exist. It appears that President Trump has publicly warned that if Iran continues to attack merchant ships in the Strait of Hormuz without complying with the MOE, the US military may launch a large-scale military operation. In fact, from President Trump's perspective, it's a situation where he can't help but be very angry. Despite criticism in the US for giving too much to Iran, President Trump signed the MOU to open the Strait of Hormuz, but Iran still attacks merchant ships. It's understandable he's dissatisfied. However, there's some good news. Military tensions in the strait have temporarily eased, so our country's ships are leaving the dangerous waters one by one. Thanks to real-time monitoring and coordinated departures by the government and shipping companies, several Korean ships have exited the strait safely. It's not a stage where we can be completely relieved yet, but at the very least, the fact that ships are able to move again is being seen as positive news. Currently, there are 3 Korean ships remaining near the Strait of Hormuz. There are 13 Korean crew members on these ships, and including 30 Koreans aboard foreign vessels, a total of 43 Koreans remain in the area. Our government is continuously checking on the safety of the crew through local organizations and related agencies, and is providing necessary support in response to changes in the maritime situation. Of the remaining ships, 2 are scheduled to move to safe waters as soon as preparations for departure are complete. However, the situation is different for the last ship, the Namu Ho. The Namu Ho was damaged by an earlier attack by Iran, making normal operation difficult, and it is currently being repaired in Dubai. Hull inspections and parts replacement are ongoing, so operations can't resume immediately. Repairs are scheduled to finish, and departure should be possible by mid-July. The government also plans to continue providing necessary support until the Namu Ho is able to depart, while continuously monitoring the progress of repairs and the safety of the crew. There's another interesting point. The ceasefire between the US and Iran is once again unstable, and in fact, both sides have exchanged military attacks for 2 consecutive days. Although the ceasefire is shaky, the market appears to be calmer than expected. We've been seeing this pattern for a while now. Typically, Middle East military conflicts cause oil prices to soar and global stocks to plummet, but recent market fluctuations from the current war have stayed limited. Investors are watching the situation, but it doesn't appear likely to become a full-scale war. The market is seen as betting that the conflict will stay limited to military responses. Above all, since there has not been a major disruption in oil supply and the Strait of Hormuz has not been completely blocked, it is believed that the energy market is unlikely to experience an immediate shock. In fact, most oil transportation is continuing, so the entire supply chain has not been disrupted. However, it is difficult to say for certain that this situation will continue. If additional attacks occur in the Strait of Hormuz, or if disruptions in oil transportation become a reality, the market atmosphere could change rapidly at any time. Although the financial markets are relatively calm right now, there is still a possibility that investor sentiment could change significantly depending on future developments. The reason this ceasefire is so easily shaken is actually due to the nature of the agreement itself. The MOE signed this time is not a peace treaty that completely ends the war, but rather a political agreement aimed at temporarily stopping military clashes and continuing follow-up negotiations. In other words, the 2 sides did not sign the agreement after resolving all their conflicts, but rather agreed to stop the gunfire first in order to prevent a bigger clash. Therefore, even after the agreement, the mutual suspicion and distrust have not been resolved at all. The United States suspects that Iran could attack merchant ships at any time or continue military pressure through armed groups in the region, while Iran believes that the United States is continuing to pressure them by supporting Israel and other allies. Since the agreement was reached without mutual trust, even a small incident could easily escalate into a military clash. In this situation, even an accidental clash or misunderstanding could rapidly increase tensions. Even if one side claims that their response is purely defensive, the other side may perceive it as an attack, leading to a vicious cycle of retaliation. In fact, this time as well, attacks on merchant ships and retaliatory airstrikes and missile attacks occurred in quick succession, clearly showing how fragile the ceasefire is. Officially, the ceasefire agreement has not yet been broken. However, as military actions continue and both sides' rhetoric intensifies, if follow-up negotiations do not produce results, this ceasefire agreement could be shaken at any time. In diplomatic circles, building mutual trust is seen as much harder than maintaining a ceasefire. So far, the United States and Iran have limited military actions to pressuring each other. However, what experts are most concerned about are the unexpected variables that may arise in the future. If there is a situation where a large number of casualties occur at a US military base, or Iran's key military facilities suffer major damage, both sides may respond much more strongly than they have so far. In addition, if a civilian ship sinks or foreign sailors are killed while passing through the Strait of Hormuz, international pressure could intensify even further. If this happens, the current ceasefire MOU is likely to lose its effectiveness. Follow-up negotiations could be suspended, and it would be hard to rule out the possibility that both sides might return to prioritizing military responses over diplomacy. Although neither side has officially declared all-out war yet, since even a small incident could rapidly escalate tensions, what happens in the next few days will be a key variable that determines the situation in the Middle East.